My name is Carolyn Dempsey. I am 63 years old. Last February, at my own birthday dinner, in my own dining room, my daughter-in-law handed me a pen. Not a regular pen. My pen. The thick-barreled adaptive grip pen I've carried in my purse for 15 years because my right hand no longer works the way it used to. She picked it up off the sideboard where I had set it that afternoon when she asked me to write out the seating cards. She handed it to me in front of 10 people, smiled at the room the way you smile when you're giving someone a gift, and said, "Mom writes the most beautiful thank you notes. Would you start on those while we clear? Your handwriting is just so elegant." My granddaughter was 16. She was sitting 4 chairs down from me. She put her fork on her plate and looked at me, and then she looked at her hands. I held the pen. Gretchen went back to the head of the table. Her mother was sitting there. That had been Gordon's chair for 31 years, and for the first 2 years after he died, I kept it empty at every family meal, and then one evening, Gretchen moved a place setting into it without asking me, and nobody said anything, including me. I held my pen and said nothing, and the table went on around me. But what I did the next morning took 8 weeks to arrive, and when it arrived in a courtroom in Fredericksburg, Virginia, on the record. Welcome to Brave Mom Stories. If you've ever sat at your own table and held your tongue when you should have held your ground, you'll want to stay for this one. Drop a comment and please subscribe. Gordon and I bought our house on Mill Pond Road in Stafford County in the spring of 1993. Brick rancher, 3 bedrooms, a back deck. Gordled himself the summer before our son was born. We paid $142,000 for it, and the mortgage scared us both. He was a mechanical engineer. I worked in benefits administration at Blue Ridge Medical Systems in Fredericksburg, and I would work there for 28 years. In April of 2009, I was driving back from my lunch break on Route 1 when a commercial delivery truck failed to yield at an intersection and hit my car on the passenger side. The impact threw my body across the center console. My right shoulder hit the window frame. I remember the sound more than anything. Not a crash, more like a compression, as if everything got squeezed into 1 second and then split open. The damage was to my right shoulder, and the nerves that run from it down into my arm. 3 surgeries over 4 years. 18 months of physical therapy. A rotator cuff rebuilt from a tissue graft and grip strength in my right hand that never came back the way it was. At my last evaluation, in 2021, my right hand grip measured 14 pounds. A healthy woman my age measures around 55. I cannot hold a full coffee mug in my right hand. I cannot open a jar. I cannot hold a pen with my right hand at all. I have written with my left hand for 15 years. Gretchen knows this. She has known it since the day my son brought her to meet us in 2011. She has watched me set my coffee mug down with 2 hands. She has seen the adaptive tools in my kitchen drawer. She has handed me this same thick grip pen off this same sideboard herself, on 3 separate occasions with a kind voice, and given it back to me like she was doing me a favor. She knows exactly what that pen is and what it means. Which is why, at my birthday dinner, when she picked it up in front of 10 people and said, "Mom writes the most beautiful thank you notes," and pressed it into my hand, I understood what she was doing. And I sat there and held it and said nothing. But here is what she did not know about that pen. Gordon and I were married in 1988. He died on a Wednesday in October of 2023, a brain aneurysm, 67 years old, no warning, in the living room while he was watching the evening news. My son got there before the ambulance. I did not move Gordon's recliner for 8 months. I am not going to stay in that part of the story very long, because it is not what this is about. But I want you to know it happened, because everything that came after has Gordon's shape in it somewhere. My son is 40 years old. He and Gretchen have been married 11 years. They have 2 children, my granddaughter, who is 16, and my grandson, who is 12. My son runs a landscaping company out of Woodbridge. He is good at the outdoor work and he is not good at the paperwork, and those 2 things in combination are how we ended up in a courtroom. Gretchen manages accounts for a property management firm in Stafford. She is organized the way some people are cold, thoroughly, and without noticing. She took over Thanksgiving in 2021, the first one without Gordon. She offered to come to my house and manage everything, which at the time felt like relief. I said yes. In 2022, she brought her own tablecloth. In 2023, she brought her own serving dishes and reorganized my pantry while I was napping. In 2024, she called 3 weeks ahead of my birthday to ask whether my monthly payment still came in on the 15th. I told her it did. Nobody in my family understood why I answered that question until March. Here is what my monthly payment is, because I need you to understand it clearly before the rest of this makes sense. The case was Dempsey v. Cardinal Freight Systems, Inc., filed in Stafford County Circuit Court in 2009. The truck driver had 3 prior moving violations. Their insurer settled in early 2011. On February 14, 2011, Valentine's Day, which Gordon thought was appropriate, I sat at a conference table in Fredericksburg and signed 3 documents: a settlement agreement, a release, and a qualified assignment, moving the obligation to pay me from Cardinal Freight's insurer to a company called Shenandoah Settlement Holdings, which then purchased an annuity from Blue Mountain Life Insurance Company to fund the payments. Contract number BML SS 2001-11-0047. I have known that number for 14 years. The total guaranteed payments over 22 years, February 2011 through February 2033, come to $1,200,000. I need to explain what that number is and what it is not. I worked in benefits administration for 28 years. I processed disability claims. I reviewed structured settlement documents for injured employees. I read annuity contracts the way other people read grocery lists. So let me tell you plainly, $1.2 million is not a bank balance. It is not a lump sum sitting somewhere with my name on it. It is a schedule of payments across 2 decades, funded by an annuity that cost the settling insurer $389,000 on the day they bought it. As of January 2025, I had received $792,000 of it. The remaining $408,000 was still to come, monthly, through February 2033, and in a lump sum at the end. And paragraph 6 of my qualified assignment says this: the payment rights shall not be sold, transferred, assigned, pledged, or otherwise encumbered or alienated by the payee. No acceleration, no deferral, no transfer, no exception. I had reviewed that paragraph in other people's documents approximately 2,000 times over my career. That was the first time it was about me. Gretchen found out about my settlement when I was hospitalized for a hip replacement in the spring of 2020. She helped my son handle my mail for 3 weeks, and my April annuity statement came while I was still in the hospital. The total guaranteed benefit is printed at the bottom of every annual statement on page 2, $1,200,000. She had been looking at that number for nearly 5 years. On a Thursday evening in October 2024, my son came to my house with a folder. He had not been to the house alone since August dust. He stood in my kitchen with his jacket on, which is what he does when he doesn't plan to stay. "Mom, the annuity company needs you to update your payment election form. If it doesn't get in by the 1st, it might delay your November deposit." There is no such thing as a payment election update form. There is an annual life verification certification, and it comes every June, and it is 1 page. I turned on the kitchen light and sat down at the table and opened the folder. Page 1, Transfer Agreement and Absolute Assignment of Structured Settlement Payment Rights. Purchaser, Clearwater Funding, LLC. Page 9, A Waiver of Independent Financial Advice, pre-printed with a signature line. Last page, a disclosure statement showing the purchase price, $81,600 for the remaining $408,000 in payments. 20 cents on the dollar. I read every page. It took me 17 minutes. My son stood by the door the entire time and did not sit down. Then I picked up my thick grip pen, held it in my left hand, and signed my name. I wrote the date, October 10, 2024. And next to the date, in the same ink, I wrote the time. 7:22 p.m. My son said, "Why are you writing the time?" I said, "Old habit, 28 years in benefits." He took the folder and left. I heard his truck back out of the driveway, and I sat at the kitchen table for a long while with my left hand flat on the wood, and I thought about paragraph 6. February 8, 2025, my 63rd birthday. 10 people at my dining room table, my son and Gretchen, my grandchildren, Gretchen's mother Dolores, who is 62 and moved to Stafford from Richmond 2 years ago. Gretchen's cousin Preston, who works in financial services and whom I had met exactly 4 times. 2 neighbors, the Hallorans, who have eaten with me on my birthday for 12 years. And my friend Edith, 66, who has known me since our children were in elementary school together. Dolores sat at the head of the table. Gordon's chair. I was placed at the corner near the kitchen, closest to the door, which I'm told is easier for me because I walk with a cane now, and 11 fewer steps is a real consideration, and Gretchen has never once given me those 11 steps without someone watching. At 6 o'clock, Gretchen brought the wine around. She started at the head of the table. She filled her mother's glass generously, the way you do when you want a room to see you being generous. Dolores put her hand on Gretchen's wrist and said something about how lucky she was. Then Gretchen poured for Preston, for my son, for Edith, for the Hallorans. She walked past my glass. I assumed she had simply run out. That happens. It was not worth a word. She went to the kitchen and came back and set an empty glass in front of me and said she'd get to it in a moment. Then she picked up my pen from the sideboard, my thick grip pen, which I had set there earlier when she asked me to write out the seating cards. She picked it up, turned toward the table, and held it out to me with a smile. "Mom writes the most beautiful thank you notes. Would you mind starting on those while we clear the salad course? Your handwriting is just so elegant." She said it, the way you say something, when you are certain the room is watching, and equally certain the room will not correct you. I want to be precise about what she knew when she did this. My right hand does not grip a pen. I have not written with my right hand since the summer of 2009. Gretchen has handed things to my left hand. She has seen me sign birthday cards with my left hand. She has watched me use this pen. She has never once confused my hands. She handed me the pen in front of 10 people to tell them, and to remind me what I was in that house. I took it. I held it in my left hand, the hand I have been writing with for 15 years, since an occupational therapist named Mrs. Ballard sat across from me in a rehabilitation center in Fredericksburg and said, "We are going to teach your left hand everything your right one used to know. Don't skip a day, not for a holiday, not for a bad morning." I haven't. I write faster left-handed now than I ever wrote right-handed. I sign my name in one clean motion. Mrs. Ballard used to say my left hand was a late bloomer. I held the pen, and I did not write a single thank you note. Gretchen did not sit down after that. She stood with her wine glass and waited for the table to quiet. A table always quiets for a woman who is about to speak. "I just want to say," she said, "this family has been through so much, and I feel like this year things are finally on track. Martin has worked so hard." She glanced at my son, who put his fork down and looked at his plate. "We've got the finances sorted out. Finally, it's a real fresh start." Preston nodded once, the way you nod when you already know what the person is going to say. Edith looked at me across the table. I did not look back. $408,000. What was left of a truck driver who didn't stop, 3 surgeries, 14 years of a left hand, learning to carry the weight. Family money now. My granddaughter had stopped eating. She is 16. She looked at her mother, then at her father, then across the table at me. I said nothing. I held my pen and I let the evening go on without me. I need you to understand one thing before I tell you what happened next. I was not stunned. I was not humiliated into silence. I had known this moment was coming for 24 days. I spent 28 years reviewing benefits documents for people who were confused, frightened, grieving, or being pressured. Sometimes all at once. I learned one thing above everything else in that job: the person who stays quiet and writes down the date always has more to work with than the person who argues in the room. Gretchen thought she was celebrating. She was creating a record. The rest of the evening went the way those evenings go. Dolores told the same story she always tells, about a contractor who cheated her years ago, and she tells it well, with the ease of someone who has had time to polish every word. Preston talked about interest rates. My son talked about his landscaping contracts and said twice that business was steady, which is one more time than you say it when it is true. He did not look at me once between 6 and 9 o'clock. Not once. He sat 12 feet away for 3 hours and never once let his eyes come down the table. My granddaughter carried my birthday cake out from the kitchen at 8:30. She set it in front of me. She put her hand briefly onto my shoulder on the way back to her seat and didn't say anything, and didn't need to. They left at 9:15. I heard car doors, and then the street was quiet. Then I went and got a legal pad from my desk. Here is what my kitchen looks like at 10 o'clock at night. The counter on the left side is 2 inches lower than standard because Gordon lowered it in 2012 when reaching overhead became too painful for me. The faucet handle is a lever style, not a knob, because knobs require grip. On the windowsill above the sink is a small clay pot with a jade plant in it. A plant Gretchen gave me 6 years ago before any of this, when she was still bringing me things instead of taking them. I have kept it alive. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote 4 lines. Then I looked at them for a while. Then I put the legal pad in my bag so I would not lose my nerve overnight. I have been writing letters like that for 28 years. That night was the first time I ever had to write one for myself. Let me tell you what I did for a living, because it is the reason this ended the way it did. I started at Blue Ridge Medical Systems in 1991 as an HR assistant. I processed paperwork, filed documentation for injured on-the-job claims, answered phones for people who were furious or frightened or lying, sometimes all 3. In 1998, they made me a benefits coordinator. In 2004, they moved me into structured settlement compliance, reviewing payment contracts for employees who had settled workers' compensation and disability claims, making sure the documents were sound, making sure no one had access to those payment streams who was not supposed to. I read the Virginia Structured Settlement Protection Act so many times I could recite sections of it at the kitchen table. I knew what a qualified assignment was before I had one. I knew exactly what it meant when I signed mine in 2011. And I knew, when my son handed me that folder in October, that what he needed me to sign was worth absolutely nothing without a judge. Virginia Code, Sections 59.1475 through 59.1480. A transfer of structured settlement payment rights is void unless a court approves it in advance. The buyer files the application. They have to serve notice on all interested parties. They have to give the payee not less than 10 days between receiving the disclosure statement and signing the transfer agreement. 10 days. That is the window the law builds in, so that a person sitting alone in her kitchen has time to think. My son handed me the transfer agreement and the disclosure statement in the same folder on the same evening. I received them at 7:22 p.m. I signed them at 7:22 p.m. I wrote the time next to my name. February 9, 2025, the morning after my birthday. The Stafford Post Office on Courthouse Road opens at 8:30. I was there at 8:41 with 3 envelopes, priority certified mail, return receipt requested. The first letter went to Blue Mountain Life Insurance Company. It revoked, effective immediately, the authorized representative designation I had signed in 2020 during my hip replacement hospitalization, naming my son as my representative for inquiries about contract BMLSS 2011-0047. It instructed the company that no information about my contract was to be released to any party other than the payee. The second letter went to the Payment Operations Department at the same company. It changed my direct deposit instructions from the joint account my son and I had opened during my recovery to a new account in my name, only at a different bank, effective with the March 15th payment. The third letter went to both Blue Mountain Life and Shenandoah Settlement Holdings, the qualified assignee. It cited paragraph 6 of my qualified assignment. It stated that no transfer, assignment, pledge, or encumbrance of my payment rights was to be honored without a final court order from Stafford County Circuit Court, entered under Virginia Code Section 59.1475. It asked that any third-party inquiry about my payment rights be reported to me in writing within 5 business days. And it requested a complete certified printout of all third-party contact records on my contract. 3 green return receipt cards. The woman at the counter peeled them off and pressed them onto the backs of the envelopes and said to have a good day. I want to be clear about what I did that morning. I did not hire anyone. I did not confront a living soul. I revoked an authorization, changed a bank account, and asked a company for paperwork I was legally entitled to request. What came back with the return receipts was what I had been waiting for. On March 3, I received a thick envelope from Blue Mountain Life. A contact history printout certified, signed by a case manager in payment services. 4 entries. May 12, 2020. Inquiry. Annual benefit summary requested. Caller identified as authorized representative. November 8, 2022. Inquiry. Question regarding transferability of payment rights. Caller referred to Virginia SSPA requirements. September 19, 2024. Inquiry. Third-party funding application initiated. Purchaser, Clearwater Funding LLC. October 11, 2024. Document received. Transfer agreement and disclosure statement submitted by transferee. I read the first line 3 times. May 12, 2020. I had come home from the hospital 9 days before that. I was still on pain medication. I couldn't hold a pen steady. Gretchen had sat at my kitchen table and filled out the authorized representative form herself, so that my son could call the company on my behalf if I ended up back in the hospital. And stapled to that form, the way it always is, was my annual benefit statement. $1,200,000 on line 7. She had been looking at that number for 5 years. 2 years later, she called to ask if the payments could be transferred. They told her what they tell everyone who asks. It requires a court order. She went away and planned for 2 more years. That is not a moment of weakness, that is a calendar. Nobody called to invite me to Easter. I found out through Edith, who heard from the Halorans, who saw a photo Dolores posted of a table with 12 place settings. My granddaughter texted me on Easter Sunday at 4 in the afternoon, a picture of a tulip from their backyard and 3 words. Thinking of you. I printed it and put it on my refrigerator with a magnet. The week after, Edith came over, and we sat at my kitchen table with a pot of coffee, and she told me what her nephew had told her. He works in commercial lending in Woodbridge. My son's landscaping company had expanded in 2023. A second crew, new equipment, a leased equipment yard. Then a large property management contract fell through in the spring of 2024. By November, he was behind on his equipment financing, not catastrophically, but badly enough that a solution had to come from somewhere. Gretchen's cousin Preston works in financial services. He had done referral work for Clearwater Funding before. His fee on a completed deal, 6% of the purchase price, 6% of $81,600. He had sat at my birthday dinner and nodded slowly while Gretchen announced that the finances were sorted out. In March, I drove to Fredericksburg and sat across from a lawyer named Cora Finch, who has a practice above a dry cleaner on William Street and has been doing civil litigation in this circuit for 26 years. $1,200 retainer, $325 an hour. I wrote the check myself, in my left hand, the way I write every check. She told me most of what I already knew. I made her tell me, anyway, because there's a difference between knowing something professionally and having someone who argues in front of that particular bench confirm it in the same room. Here is what she said. Under the Virginia Structured Settlement Protection Act, a transfer of payment rights requires circuit court approval. The buyer files the application. They have to notify all interested parties. The payee must receive the disclosure statement not less than 10 days before signing the transfer agreement. The court must find that the transfer is in the payee's best interest, that the payee received independent financial advice or knowingly waived it in writing, and that the transfer does not violate any applicable law. The payee has to appear in person. She took off her glasses. "Do you want me to try to stop it?" "No, I want it to go all the way. I want it in a transcript." She put her glasses back on. On April 2nd, Clearwater Funding LLC filed its application in Stafford County Circuit Court. Docket number CL25-847. They had no choice. A structured settlement transfer attempted without prior court approval in Virginia is void. The federal excise tax consequences alone would have consumed every dollar of their profit. On April 7, a process server knocked on my door and handed me an envelope. Inside, a copy of the application, the transfer agreement with my signature on it, the disclosure statement, and a hearing notice. Thursday, May 8, 2025, 9:30 in the morning, Stafford County Circuit Court. I turned to the payment schedule. Monthly payments from March 2026 through February 2033, totaling $408,000. Purchase price, $81,600. I sat on the bench in my front hall with my coat still on and read that number twice. This was the whole prize. This was what my son had sat through my birthday dinner for. What his wife had handed me my own pen for. What Dolores had occupied Gordon's chair for. $81,000. I spread every document across my dining room table and worked it the way I worked files for 28 years. You don't start with the argument. You start with the dates. Every document in chronological order, every signature cross-referenced, every date checked against every other date. It took me 35 minutes to find it. The transfer agreement was dated October 10, 2024. The acknowledgement of receipt of the disclosure statement was dated October 10, 2024. Virginia law requires that the payee receive the disclosure statement not less than 10 days before executing the transfer agreement. I received both documents in the same folder on the same evening. My son handed them to me simultaneously. I signed them simultaneously, and next to both signatures in blue ink in my own left hand, 7:22 p.m. Not 2 dates, not 2 evenings. One night in my kitchen under one lamp. I did not manufacture that evidence. I wrote the time because I have written the time on every important document for 28 years. It is a habit so automatic I do not think about it anymore. I thought about it very carefully that October evening, sitting alone after my son's truck had left the lane. I thought about it, and I put the legal pad in my bag. There was one more thing to address. On page 9 of the folder, the waiver of independent financial advice, pre-printed with a signature line. I had left it blank on October 10. I left it blank again in April. Instead, I called a certified financial planner named Bonnie Alcott, who works out of an office in Stafford and had never spoken to me before that Tuesday morning. She charged me $900 for a written assessment. I paid from my own checking account. I have the canceled check. Her letter is dated April 21, 2025, 4 pages. The 3 sentences that matter: the payment stream Clearwater Funding proposed to purchase totaled $408. 00 due between March 2026 and February 2033. The offered purchase price of $81,600 represented 20 cents on the dollar. Calculated at the applicable federal rate, the present value of those payments was approximately $341,000. She also noted, at the bottom of page 3, something I had already seen in the court filing, but wanted confirmed by an outside voice. The referral fee paid by Clearwater Funding to its sourcing consultant, per their own disclosure, 6% of the purchase price, $4,896, payable to Preston Malone. Preston, who had eaten at my birthday table, who had nodded at the wine glass announcement. His last name was his mother's, different from Gretchen's. which is why I hadn't connected it immediately. I looked it up after Bonnie's letter arrived. Between April 7 and May 8, Gretchen called me 11 times in 9 days. I did not answer once. I responded to each call the same way by email with a copy saved. I will be present at the hearing on May 8. Anything else, please put it in writing. She filled the silence herself. Those emails went to Clearwater Funding's office asking whether the hearing could be moved, whether the matter could be resolved before the court date, whether family attendance was required. Every single one of those messages went into a file. Not my file, theirs. And under Virginia law, when a transferee files an application in circuit court, the transferee files its file with the court. I bought a copy at the clerk's window on the Friday before the hearing, 50 cents a page. If you've ever been told you're being difficult for asking one question about your own paperwork, I'd like to hear about it. Put it in the comments. May 8, 2025, 9:30 in the morning, Stafford County Circuit Court. Edith drove. She carried the accordion file and set it on the counsel table and squeezed my shoulder once and went and sat in the gallery. Cora came in at 9:20 and took the chair beside me. Ready? I've been ready since October 10, I said. Clearwater Funding's attorney was a man named Daltrey, silver-haired, efficient, the manner of someone who does these hearings often and expects them to be brief. Behind him, Preston in a sport coat he did not remove, and in the second row on the right, my son, Gretchen, beside him. Dolores on the far end, her purse still on her arm. Gretchen watched me come up the aisle with my cane. She leaned toward her mother and said something behind her hand, and Dolores smiled at the floor. The Honorable Judge Annette Birch came in at 9:32. Her first question was for Daltrey. Counsel, confirm for me that proper notice went to the payee not less than 10 days before today's hearing. Yes, Your Honor, filed April 2, served April 7. And the payee is present. I stood. It takes me a moment and everyone always waits. Present, Your Honor, Carolyn Dempsey. Daltrey did what he was paid to do. He said the transfer would allow me to consolidate resources while I was still in good health. He said the payee was 63 years old and the payments in question did not begin for another year. He noted that the payee's family supported the arrangement and was present in the courtroom. My son nodded in the second row. Gretchen nodded slowly. The way you nod when you believe the judge is watching. Judge Birch let him finish. Mrs. Dempsey, you object to this transfer? I do, Your Honor. On what grounds? I had been thinking about that question for 4 months. In a kitchen with the furnace running at night. At my low counter with the jade plant on the windowsill. At a table where I ate alone most evenings and had made my peace with it. 3 documents, Your Honor. 2 of them are theirs. Cora handed up 2 pages. Your Honor, this is the signature page of the transfer agreement. Dated October 10, 2024. This is the acknowledgement of receipt of the disclosure statement. Also dated October 10, 2024. Virginia law requires the payee to receive the disclosure statement not less than 10 days before executing the transfer agreement. I received both documents in the same folder. On the same evening. How do you establish that? Because I wrote the time next to my signature. Your Honor, both pages. 7:22 p.m., that is my handwriting, my left hand. I administered structured settlement compliance for 28 years. I write the time on every document I sign. The courtroom was quiet, not dramatically quiet, just the kind of quiet that happens when something clicks into place. Daltrey asked to approach. Your Honor, we would characterize that notation as a clerical inconsistency. We can cure it with an amended acknowledgement dated separately. Judge Birch did not look up from the pages. Counsel, this is not a typographical error. The 10-day period is not procedural decoration. It is the legal protection built into this statute specifically so a payee has time to think. You cannot amend around a statutory condition. From the second row, too loud for the room. Gretchen said to my son, you gave her both documents at the same time. My son said nothing. He was looking at the back of my head. I did not turn around. Not once all morning. The second document, Your Honor. This one is mine. Cora handed up Bonnie Alcott's letter. Virginia Code requires a finding that I received independent financial advice about this transfer, or knowingly waived it in writing. The waiver form is on page 9 of the applicant's own filing. It is blank. I have never signed it. Instead, I retained certified financial planner at my own expense. Her letter is dated April 21, 2025. Judge Birch read for perhaps 40 seconds. And Ms. Alcott's assessment of the purchase price. That $81,600 for payments worth $341,000 at present value represents a discount of 76%, and that the referral fee paid by the buyer, 6%, 4,896 ounces, was paid to a sourcing consultant named Preston Malone. Is Mr. Malone in the courtroom? The sport coat stood. What is your relationship to the Pays family? He said it very quietly. My cousin is the Pays daughter-in-law. Dolores pressed a tissue to her face, the kind of crying meant to be heard. Judge Birch did not look up. The third document, Your Honor. It is also theirs. Page 14 of the applicant's own filing. I had bought the copy at the clerk's office for $38. This is Clearwater Funding's intake form, submitted by G. Dempsey. Filed September 19, 2024. At the bottom, the intake agent included the original email from the referring party. Cora handed it up. Judge Birch read it aloud, because a court reads its exhibits into the record. Once everything clears, the annuity finally becomes what it should be, a resource for the whole family. The court reporter's hands moved. The room held its breath the way a room does when there is nothing useful left to say. Then Gretchen was on her feet. That was a private email. That was a private communication between family members. You filed it with the court, Judge Birch said, without raising her voice at all. Then my son stood up, and for 3 seconds, he was something I recognized from a very long time ago. You were in the hospital for 14 months, he said. I was 13 years old. You missed my whole 7th grade, my whole 8th grade. His voice broke in the middle of it. He found the rest 4 seconds later. If you don't let this go through, I lose the business. That is on you. I had waited 30 years for the first half of that sentence. He gave me the second half 4 seconds later. Judge Birch did not let the room move. Mrs. Dempsey, anything further? One paragraph, Your Honor. From my qualified assignment, February 14, 2011. I read paragraph 6, cannot be sold, cannot be assigned, cannot be pledged, hypothecated, encumbered, or transferred, no acceleration, no deferral, no exception. That language does not exist to protect the insurance company, Your Honor. It exists because a qualified assignment only functions if the payment stream belongs to exactly one person and cannot become anyone else's asset. It was built that way in 2011, before my daughter-in-law knew my name. It is not family money. It has never been family money. It is one person's money. It was bought with my right shoulder and 14 years of my left hand learning to take its place. I set the transfer agreement down. Then I reached behind the last divider in my accordion file and took out the thick grip pen, laid it flat on the edge of the counsel table. In October of 2009, an occupational therapist named Mrs. Ballard handed me a pen. She put it in my left hand and said, "Your left hand is going to learn everything your right one used to know. Don't skip a day, not for a holiday, not for a bad morning." I haven't. That pen is what I have been writing with for 15 years. It is why I can still sign my own name. And on October 10, 2024, it is exactly why my signature has a time written next to it. I did not say the other part. I did not need to. Everyone in the second row already knew what happened at my birthday table. Judge Birch took her glasses off. The application is denied. The order was entered on May 19, 2025. Application denied. Disclosure statement not delivered within the statutory period. No valid waiver of independent professional advice. No finding of best interest. It is a public record. Anyone can walk into the Stafford County Circuit Court and request docket CL 25-847. 50 cents a page. Clearwater Funding withdrew 4 days later. Without a court order, the federal excise tax on the discount runs 40%. No funding company on earth absorbs that. There is no second buyer. There is no quiet workaround. There is only the statute, and that is all there is. Preston Malone did not collect $4,896. Cora told me 3 weeks after the hearing that a denied application with a judge's findings follows a consultant into every subsequent proceeding. The next court that sees his name reads this one first. My son moved to a smaller operation in June, 2 crews instead of 3, a shared yard off Route 610. He is a good landscaper. He always was. That was never the problem. Gretchen left her firm in the summer. Dolores moved back to Richmond in July. On March 15, 6 weeks before any of that happened, $4,900 posted to a new account with only my name on it on time, the way it has posted on the 15th of every month since February 2011. Nobody called to ask about it. That was the part I did not expect, not the courtroom. The telephone that simply stopped ringing the moment there was nothing left in me to unlock. In April, I wrote my son a letter. Regular mail, 1 stamp, no return receipt, because I did not need proof of anything anymore. 3 paragraphs. The first apologized for the 14 months. All of them. The hospital room at Christmas, the science fairs I heard about by phone, the report cards his aunt mailed to me in an envelope because I couldn't be there to sign them. I have been sorry for 30 years. I had never once put it in writing. It turns out that is the only form in which an apology holds. The second said I was not sorry for writing the time next to my name, and that I would do it again on any evening of any year. The third was short, because a boundary weakens with every extra word. Anything concerning contract BML SS 2011-0047 comes to me directly and in writing. Anything, at all. My kitchen door is where it has always been, open to my grandchildren any day of the week, with nothing required in return. My granddaughter came on the first Saturday in May. She texted me from the bus stop at the end of Mill Pond Road. I walked down the driveway to meet her because it gave me something to do with the waiting. We made soup. She asked to see how I write left-handed now, and I showed her. The way I learned to anchor the page with my right wrist and pull the pen across instead of pushing, which is the opposite of how I was taught in school 50 years ago. She tried it herself with my thick grip pen and said it felt strange. I told her most useful things do at first. She wanted to know why I keep the pen on the sideboard, always in the same spot. I said it was so I always know where to find it. She looked at it sitting there and was quiet for a moment. Is it weird, she said, that your most important thing is just a pen? I thought about that. A pen is how you write the date correctly. A pen is how you put your name on something and it counts. A pen is how you write a letter to your son that finally says the true thing, after 30 years of saying almost nothing. She nodded like that made sense, which it does. Everything that has held me upright since 2009 was not the cane, and it was not the money, and it was not a courtroom on a May morning. It was a habit so plain you could walk right past it. Read before you sign. Write the true date. Understand that a woman who says nothing is not the same thing as a woman who knows nothing. That is the whole of it. 1 thick grip pen, 3 certified letters, a room with somebody typing. If this made you want to check the paperwork you signed, on a day you were not feeling well, do it today. Check whose name sits on your accounts beside yours. Someone may have been added years ago for a good reason, on a day you were tired, and the good reason may have changed since then. Drop a comment and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.